You get to the end of the month, check your bank account, and somehow there's almost nothing left. And it makes no sense. Because you didn't buy a new car, you didn't go on some luxury vacation, you didn't suddenly start wearing designer clothes, you just grabbed coffee a few times, ordered food because you were tired, signed up for one streaming service, then another, then another. Used Klarna because it's only 4 payments, paid for faster shipping because you didn't want to wait, and then suddenly you're wondering why you can't save money. Here's the thing. Most people think financial problems come from one big mistake, but that's almost never true. Usually your finances get destroyed by 50 tiny expenses that feel completely harmless in the moment. That's why people making $40,000 a year and people making $140,000 a year often have the exact same problem. They feel broke. And the scary part is, most of these expenses are invisible. You don't notice them because they're normalized. Everybody does them. They're only $8 here, $22 there, $14.99 a month. But when you actually add them up, it gets ugly really fast. My name is Matt, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial behavior, and why smart people still end up sabotaging their finances. If you're someone who constantly wonders where your money went, who makes decent income but still struggles to save, or who has a bunch of small recurring expenses that seem harmless but quietly destroy your ability to build wealth, make sure to subscribe and like this video if it helps. Because today we're going to break down the invisible expenses that are keeping people trapped financially, even when they think they're doing okay, and trust me, some of these are going to hurt. Let's start with the obvious one, subscriptions. Now, most people think they're spending maybe $50 or $60 a month on subscriptions, but according to a 2025 survey from C+R Research, the average consumer estimates they spend around $86 per month on subscriptions, while the actual number is closer to $219. That is insane, because when you think about it, it makes sense. You've got Netflix, Spotify, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, cloud storage, a gym membership you haven't used in 4 months, a meditation app, a language app, some AI software, maybe even a meal delivery service, and because they're all spread out across the month, they don't feel painful. That's what makes them dangerous. If somebody walked up to you on the first day of every month and said, "Hey, can I have $219 in cash for all the random stuff you barely use?" You'd probably say no, but when it comes out in tiny amounts automatically, your brain barely notices. This is what behavioral economists call payment decoupling. The pain of paying gets separated from the actual purchase, and when you don't feel the pain, you spend more. Now maybe you're thinking, "Okay, Matt, but subscriptions aren't ruining my life." Fair, but let's do the math. If you spend $200 a month on subscriptions, that's $2,400 a year. If instead you invested that $200 a month into a basic index fund earning 8% annually, after 20 years you'd have over $117,000. That's not just subscriptions anymore. That's an entire retirement account. This is where things get really interesting, because people are paying a massive premium for convenience without even realizing it. Food delivery is the perfect example. You open an app because you're tired. You order a burger that costs $14 in the restaurant, but by the time you add delivery fees, service fees, taxes, a tip, and the menu markup, you're paying $28. You literally doubled the price of your meal. Now imagine you do that 3 times a week. That extra $14 becomes $42 a week. That's about $168 a month. That's over $2,000 a year, just in convenience fees. And this is what most people don't realize. You're not paying for the burger. You're paying for the removal of friction, because cooking requires effort, driving requires effort, waiting requires effort, and modern companies make billions by monetizing your impatience. Amazon does this with one-click checkout. Uber does this with instant rides. Food apps do this with saved payment methods. The easier it is to spend money, the more money you spend. That's not an opinion. That's psychology. Researchers have consistently found that people spend more when they use credit cards versus cash because the transaction feels less real. And now we've made spending even more frictionless than credit cards. We made it one tap. That's dangerous. Here's where people really get defensive. Because nobody wants to believe their daily habits are the problem. But look at this. A $7 coffee every workday is about $35 a week. That's around $150 a month. That's $1,800 a year. And if you invested that every year for 30 years at 8%, you'd end up with more than $220,000. Now look, this is always the part where people say, so what, I can never buy coffee again? No, that's not the point. The point is awareness. Because people love making fun of the latte factor, but the real issue isn't coffee. It's mindless spending. It's buying things automatically because you always do. And there's a huge difference between intentionally spending money on something you truly value and unconsciously leaking money every single day. If coffee genuinely makes your mornings better, great, keep the coffee. But maybe cut the random snacks, the convenience store drinks, the impulse Amazon purchases, the $5 add-ons that happen every day. Because those are usually the real problem. People don't go broke from one giant purchase. They go broke because they normalize hundreds of tiny leaks. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. You can earn more money, get a raise, pick up a side hustle, but if the leaks are still there, you never get ahead. Now let's talk about something that has exploded over the last few years. Buy now, pay later. Klarna, Afterpay, Affirm. These companies are brilliant because they figured out that people hate paying full price up front. So instead of saying, this costs $400, they say, it's only 4 payments of $100. And suddenly it feels affordable, even if it's not. This is called mental accounting. Your brain processes 4 smaller payments as less painful than one large payment, even though the total amount is exactly the same. And according to data from the consumer finance industry, people tend to spend significantly more when buy now, pay later options are offered. Why? Because splitting the payment lowers the emotional resistance. Now maybe you're thinking, but Matt, I always pay it off on time. That's not really the issue. The issue is that buy now, pay later changes your spending behavior. It makes you more likely to buy things you otherwise wouldn't. And when you stack multiple payments across different purchases, you lose track fast. You've got $40 here, $85 there, $22 over there. And suddenly next month's paycheck is already partially spent before it even arrives. That is one of the fastest ways to stay financially stuck. This is the big one. This is the expense that ruins people at every income level. Lifestyle inflation, you get a raise, you make more money, and instead of becoming wealthier, your lifestyle just gets more expensive. You move into a nicer apartment, upgrade your car, start flying business class. Eat out more often, start buying premium versions of everything, and look, none of those things are automatically bad. The problem is when every raise disappears into new expenses, because then your income goes up, but your financial stress stays exactly the same. According to multiple surveys, a large percentage of people earning over $100,000 a year still live paycheck to paycheck. Think about how crazy that is. At some point, it's not an income problem. It's a spending problem. This is what most people don't realize. The more expensive your lifestyle becomes, the more trapped you become. Because now you need that income level just to survive. You can't take career risks. You can't quit a toxic job. You can't handle emergencies. You built a financial life that looks successful from the outside, but feels suffocating on the inside. And honestly, that's one of the saddest financial mistakes people make. Because they spend their entire life trying to look rich instead of becoming rich. Here is where it gets uncomfortable. A lot of spending has nothing to do with logic. It has to do with emotions. People shop when they're stressed, when they're bored, when they're lonely, when they feel like they deserve it. Retail therapy is real, and companies know exactly how to trigger it. That's why online stores send you limited time offers. That's why airlines say only 2 seats left. That's why brands send discounts the second you abandon your cart. Because urgency kills rational thinking, and here's where it gets really interesting. A lot of emotional spending is actually identity spending. People buy things because of the version of themselves they want to become. They buy expensive workout clothes because they want to become healthy. They buy expensive notebooks because they want to become organized. They buy kitchen gadgets because they want to become someone who cooks. But buying the item is not the same thing as becoming the person. And that's a huge trap, because you end up paying for the fantasy version of yourself instead of doing the actual work. So what do you actually do about all of this? Because awareness is great, but awareness without action is just entertainment. Here's a really simple exercise that will probably make you uncomfortable for about 15 minutes and could save you thousands of dollars. Go through your last 3 months of bank statements and credit card statements, not 1 month, 3, because 1 month can lie. You might have had an unusually expensive month, or maybe a quiet month. 3 months shows you your actual habits. And here's what you do. Create 3 categories. Necessary, valuable. Mindless. Necessary is obvious. Rent, utilities, insurance, gas, groceries, basic transportation. Then there's valuable spending. This is important because I do not want you thinking this video is about becoming a robot who never spends money. That's not the goal. The goal is to spend aggressively on the things you truly care about and ruthlessly cut the things you don't. Maybe you love traveling. Maybe you love going out for dinner with friends. Maybe you love fitness. Maybe you genuinely love your morning coffee routine. Great. Keep those things, because money is supposed to improve your life. But then you get to the third category, mindless spending. And this is where most people realize they've been lighting money on fire. The random Amazon orders you forgot about 2 days later, the app subscriptions you barely use, the convenience store snacks, the delivery fees, the impulse purchases, the treat-yourself spending that happens 4 times a week. And here is where it gets really interesting. You need to calculate the monthly total of that mindless spending, because once people see the number in one place, it changes everything. Let's say your mindless spending adds up to $450 a month. That sounds bad. But it sounds a lot worse when you realize that's $5,400 a year. And if you invested $450 a month for 25 years at an 8% return, you'd end up with around $427,000. That is nearly $500,000 from money that, in most cases, didn't even make you happier. That's the part that hurts. Because people assume wealth is built by making some genius investment. Usually it's not. Usually wealth is built by consistently redirecting money away from things you barely care about and into things that actually grow. The good news is that fixing this is actually pretty simple. Not easy, but simple. You create friction. Because right now, companies have spent billions of dollars making spending effortless. Your job is to make it slightly harder. Delete saved credit cards from shopping websites. Remove food delivery apps from your phone. Turn off one-click checkout. Cancel subscriptions the second you stop using them. Wait 24 hours before buying anything non-essential. And honestly, for bigger purchases, wait 72 hours. Because most impulse spending disappears when you give yourself time, you also want to automate the good behavior. Set up an automatic transfer into savings the day you get paid, because if you wait until the end of the month to save whatever is left over, there usually won't be anything left over. You have to save first and spend what remains. That single shift changes everything. A really simple rule is this. Every time your income goes up, increase your savings rate before you increase your lifestyle. So if you get a raise of $500 a month, maybe $300 automatically goes toward investing and only $200 goes toward improving your lifestyle. That way you still enjoy making more money, but you're also building wealth at the same time. Because the goal is not to look rich, the goal is to become financially free. And those are 2 very different things. At the end of the day, the biggest financial mistake isn't spending money. It's spending money without realizing what it's costing you, because every small expense has a hidden price. Not just the price today, but the future value of that money, the opportunities it could have created, the stress it could have removed, the freedom it could have bought you. And this is what the majority of people never think about. They think in terms of monthly payments. Wealthy people think in terms of long-term cost. That's the difference. So take 20 minutes today, look at your spending, find the invisible leaks, and fix one of them, not all of them, just one. Because once you start noticing these patterns, you can't unsee them, and small changes repeated over time can completely change your financial future. You do not need to earn $1 million to get ahead. You just need to stop losing the money you already have. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe, like the video, and let me know in the comments what invisible expense surprised you the most, because chances are, you're definitely not the only one making it.